The first sound that cut through the pine hush was not a scream but a broken breath, torn loose as if the land itself had pressed a hand to her chest. It startled the hunter where he knelt, his fingers slick with river mud and blood, his ears trained for wind and hoofbeats. Not a human voice pitched so raw. The ravine held the echo for a heartbeat and then swallowed it. He leaned closer, low and steady, because fear could finish what the fall had begun. "Hold still," he told her, the words carried like a rope across a gap. "Breathe with me." The woman tried. The breath shuddered. Pain made its own rules out here. They were far from any town that knew mercy. Beyond the line where wagon ruts faded into elk trails, old American ground, red earth cut with stone, pine needles softening the lie of danger beneath. The hunter's name was Stonehawk, earned, not given, and he had learned to read the smallest signs. The bruise blooming under her collarbone meant a bad landing. The angle of her leg meant she would not stand soon. He had found her where the creek bent and the shale slid, her horse gone, her pack torn. The daylight thinning as if the hills had decided to close in. She was called Elara Vale, a name that sounded too gentle for this country, but she wore it like a knife kept close. She had not begged when the pain took her voice, and when she did speak, it came out rough, as if she were arguing with the hurt rather than surrendering to it. "Do not stop," she had said then. The words dragged from her because the work of staying alive demanded sound and focus. Just do it. It was not a plea for tenderness. It was a command to finish setting the bone before shock made a liar of time. Stonehawk had nodded once because he understood commands that mattered. A third figure hovered on the edge of the clearing, kneeling in the leaf mold with hands that trembled. Her name was Wren Calder, and she had followed Elara into the hills with the stubborn loyalty of a younger sister. Wren had seen hunger and dust, and men who spoke with knives in their eyes, but this was different. This was the land deciding who it would keep. She watched Stonehawk work with the quiet precision of a man who did not rush and did not waste. And she learned that fear could be taught to wait. Stonehawk cut a strip from his own sleeve and bound it firm. He pressed 2 fingers to Elara's wrist and found a rhythm that answered his own. "Breathe with me," he said again, not louder, not softer. He did not crowd her. He did not look away. He was close because closeness was sometimes the only shelter. Elara fixed her gaze on a slant of sky between branches and matched her breath to his. The pain rolled, and she rode it. The ravine listened. This country had made Stonehawk what he was. He had come west for reasons that did not fit into a sentence and stayed, because the land made room for men who kept their word to themselves. He hunted for meat and for hides, for towns that paid in coin, and for families that paid in thanks. He knew the old paths and the new dangers. He knew when to be gentle and when to be iron. Today asked for both. Elara had come west for a different reason. The valley she was headed for held a claim deed folded thin as a promise and a past she had no wish to kneel to. She had learned early that a woman alone learned fast or did not learn long. She could shoot, could ride, could bargain without blinking. But the shale had given way, and strength did not argue with gravity. When she had landed, the breath had fled and the pain had climbed. She had called out because the body sometimes knew. What pride would not say? Wren had run until her lungs burned and then run more. She had stumbled into the clearing and found Stonehawk already there, already kneeling, already doing the work. It felt like fate and felt like luck, and those two had a habit of wearing the same coat. She did not ask where he came from. She did not ask why he stayed. She watched his hands and the way his eyes softened only at the edges. They moved Elara only after the worst of it was done. Stonehawk built a litter from saplings and rawhide, his knots quick and sure. The light shifted. Birds settled. The air cooled. The day had decided to move on without them. When they lifted her, Elara gritted her teeth and held the sound in her chest. Stonehawk caught her eye and nodded once. "Breathe with me." She did, and the world narrowed to that shared rhythm. As they walked, the forest opened and closed, offering nothing, and then a small mercy in the form of a flat place near water. Stonehawk chose it without comment. He built a fire that smoked just enough to keep the flies honest. He set Alara down with care that did not insult her strength. Wren fetched water and learned how to be useful in ways that steadied her hands. The hunter spoke little, but when he did, it mattered. Night pressed close. The stars came out hard and bright. Coyotes lifted their voices and then thought better of it. Alara lay watching the sparks climb and die. She felt the ache settle into something she could name. She felt the presence of two people who would not leave. It was a strange comfort, sharper than kindness, steadier than hope. Stonehawk cleaned his knife and wiped his hands. He told them the trail ahead would be slow. He told them the weather would turn. He told them there were men in the next valley who did not ask questions they could not use. He told them he would see them through the pass at first light. He did not say why. He did not say what he would ask in return. Out here, promises were made with action. Alara closed her eyes and let the fire crackle. She had crossed half a continent to stand on a piece of ground that be hers or no one's. She had fallen and been caught by a man who moved like the land itself had lent him bones. She had felt the edge of fear and found that it did not own her. When she spoke again, her voice was low but steady. "Tomorrow," she said. Stonehawk nodded. Tomorrow, sleep came in pieces. Pain threaded through it. Dreams pressed close. Wren woke once to find Stonehawk standing watch, his silhouette cut clean against the stars. She asked if he ever rested. He said the land rested enough for both of them. She did not know what that meant, but it sounded true. Dawn crept in pale and cold. Frost touched the leaves. Alara tested her breath and found it answered. Stonehawk knelt again, checked the binding, adjusted the weight. He leaned close once more. Not to crowd, but to anchor. "Hold still," he said, because the first move of the day always told the truth. "Breathe with me," she did. The pass waited. The valley waited. And somewhere ahead, the reason Alara had come west stood quiet and patient. As if it knew she was finally on her way, they broke camp while the frost still clung to the shadows. Stonehawk moved first, quiet as the creek slipping over stone. He tightened the straps of the litter, tested each knot again, and only then nodded to Wren. She took the rear. Careful with her footing, eyes always on Alara's face. Alara did not complain. She measured each jolt, each breath, and stored the pain away like a debt she would settle later. The trail rose fast. Pines thinned, replaced by scrub and broken rock. Old American land that did not forgive mistakes. Stonehawk chose each step as if the ground spoke to him. He had crossed this pass years before, chased by weather and men both. He remembered the places where the wind cut hardest and where sound carried too far. He remembered the smell of rain before it came. Alara watched him between blinks. She had met many men on the road west, some loud, some charming, most wanting something. Stonehawk wanted nothing she could name, and that made him harder to read. His strength showed in small ways, in how he shifted the litter when the grade changed, in how he slowed when her breath tightened. He did not ask her story, and that felt like respect. Wren spoke when the silence pressed too hard. She talked about the town they had left behind, about a job promised and delayed, about a letter Alara carried close. Stonehawk listened without comment, but his eyes flicked to the ridgeline at certain words. Claim deed meant trouble. So did inheritance. The West was full of men who believed paper only mattered when a gun backed it. By midday, the sky had gone hard and white. The wind picked up, smelling of snow that was not yet visible. Stonehawk called a halt beneath a leaning juniper. He set Alara down and knelt, checking the binding again. She felt his fingers steady and sure. "You are doing fine," he said, not like praise, more like fact. Alara nodded. Facts were easier to carry, she told him, than why she was going to the valley. Her father's name had been scratched out of ledgers and spoken low after his death. He had worked land others wanted, and when sickness took him, the wanting did not die. The deed had been hidden, passed hand to hand, until it reached her. She had come alone because alone was safer than trusting the wrong help. Stonehawk's jaw tightened, just a little. He had seen that story end badly, Ren added what Alara did not say. Men had been asking questions. Riders had watched the road. Not lawmen. Hired ones. Stonehawk looked up at the sky then, gauging time. "We will not camp where they expect," he said. His voice did not rise. "That was how you knew he meant it." They moved again. Slower now. The land rougher. The pass narrowed. Rock walls close enough to touch. Sound bounced. Stonehawk kept them tight to shadow, away from the obvious track. Alara felt the weight of his decision. Each choice carried risk. Each step forward closed others behind. As the light dipped, they reached a shelf above a dry wash. Stonehawk set the litter down and scanned the far ridge. He pointed once, a small movement. Ren followed his gaze and swallowed. Far off, dust hung where no wind should have raised it. Riders, maybe two, maybe more. Too far to count. Close enough to matter. Stonehawk worked fast. He built a low screen of brush, enough to break a line of sight. He banked the fire small and smokeless. He showed Ren how to smear ash on bright cloth. Alara watched the way he planned, not for comfort but for survival. The hunter's calm settled her more than rest. Night came sharp. The wind carried sound from far away, hooves sometimes, a voice once that might have been the land speaking back. Alara lay awake, pain a low throb, fear a tighter thing. She thought of the valley and the house that waited there, empty and patient. She thought of her father's hands, cracked and sure, and the way he had taught her to stand straight. She would not turn back. Stonehawk kept watch. He remembered other nights like this, other promises made to people who did not know how fragile they were until it mattered. He had lost count of the times he had chosen to step in. He told himself it was just the job. He knew better. Ren drifted into sleep and woke again, listening. She was learning the language of the dark, how to tell wind from movement. When she asked Stonehawk what would happen if the riders found them, he answered without drama. "We keep breathing," he said. She held on to that. Before dawn, the wind shifted. Snow whispered against stone. The world went quiet in a way that made the skin prickle. Stonehawk moved closer to Alara and adjusted the blanket. He leaned in, voice low. "If it gets loud, you breathe with me." She met his eyes and nodded. Trust did not come easy to her, but it came now. They started again at first light. The snow covering their tracks, just enough to help and not enough to hide everything. Stonehawk angled off the pass, choosing a route that would cost time but by distance. Alara gripped the edge of the litter when the slope tilted. Ren's hands burned, but she did not let go. As the morning wore on, the sound of riders faded and then returned, closer now, then gone again. A game of patience. Stonehawk slowed them near a stand of twisted pine. He set Alara down and listened, eyes closed. Alara watched his face, reading the smallest changes. He was counting not steps, but chances. He spoke of the valley then, of a place where water ran year-round and grass held even in lean seasons. He had passed through once, years ago, and remembered it because it felt like a promise. Alara felt a pull at his words. The land she sought was no longer just a name on paper. It was a place that others wanted for the same reason she did. When they moved again, the air warmed and the snow thinned. The pass began to open. Stonehawk pointed out landmarks. A split boulder, a dead snag, places where men might wait. He taught Ren how to look without staring. He taught Alara how to breathe through the sharp edge of pain until it dulled by afternoon. The valley lay just beyond the next rise. Alara could feel it, a change in the air, a widening of light. Relief threatened to soften her focus. Stonehawk caught it and shook his head once. Not yet. He did not say the rest. The hardest ground often came at the end. They stopped short of the rise. Stonehawk crouched and peered ahead. His hand lifted, warning. Alara heard it then, the faint clink of metal, the low murmur of voices carried wrong by the wind. Someone was already there, waiting. Stonehawk turned back to them, eyes steady, calculating. The valley was close enough to taste. And the choice of how to enter it would decide more than just the day. Stonehawk eased back from the rise like a man stepping away from a rattler. His palm lifted again, holding Ren still, holding the whole world still if it would listen. Ilara lay on the litter with her breath tight and quiet. The valley was right there, close enough that the wind carried the smell of damp grass. But the sound ahead did not belong to cattle or creek water. It was human. It was waiting. Ren crawled to Stonehawk's side, belly to the cold ground, hair falling into her eyes. She peered through the brush the way he showed her, not pushing forward, letting the land hide her. Below, the valley opened wide, a quilt of green and brown, with a thin ribbon of water shining where the sun touched it. Near the line of cottonwoods by the creek, 3 horses stood tied. 2 men sat near a low fire ring, not using a fire, just squatting as if they owned the air. A third leaned against a tree, hat brim low, rifle across his lap like a lazy thought. Ilara's throat went dry. She knew that posture. Men who did not have to hurry, men who believed the day belonged to them. Stonehawk watched them a long moment, eyes narrowed, face still. He was listening for what he could not see. More riders could be hidden beyond the trees. A 4th could be up on the opposite ridge. The West loved ambush the way it loved Windstor. "We go around," Ren whispered. Stonehawk did not answer right away. The easiest path into the valley was also the path everyone took. A litter could not crawl down a cliff. He looked back at Ilara. Her eyes held steady, but the pain had drained color from her cheeks. She could not run. She could barely sit without the world tipping. "Who are they?" Lara asked, voice low. Stonehawk studied the men again. Could be hired hands. Could be claim jumpers. Could be men sent to scare you off and make you sell cheap. He paused, then added, "Could be worse." Ren's hands curled into fists. She wanted to believe they could talk their way through. Ilara knew better. She had seen what greed did when land was involved. She had heard the stories of widows made quiet and deeds changed by force. Her father had always said the paper's only half the fight. Stonehawk shifted, thinking like a hunter, not a hero. He scanned the cottonwoods, the creek line, the small cabin shape tucked farther back in the trees. A cabin. Ilara's heart hit hard. That had to be it. Her father's place, or what was left of it. Smoke did not rise from its chimney. It looked asleep. But those men were awake. Stonehawk pointed to a dry wash that cut down toward the valley from their left. It would hide them part way, but it ended in open ground. "If we can get to the cottonwoods without being seen," he said, "we can reach the cabin." "If the cabin is still ours to reach?" "Ours?" Ren repeated without meaning to. Ilara heard it and felt something twist. She had been alone in her plans until now. Alone was safer. Alone also meant no one to lean on when the ground gave way. She looked at Stonehawk's face and saw the hard truth. He was already involved. Whether he wanted it or not, his footprints were in her trail. They waited until the sun dipped behind a cloud, the light going flat. The men below shifted positions, one standing to stretch, another walking to the creek to piss without fear. That told Stonehawk something. Men who posted no lookout either had more men hidden or believed no one would dare approach. Either way, it was arrogance, and arrogance could be used. He and Ren lifted the litter again. It was careful, slow, using the brush as cover. Ilara held her breath through the worst jolts, tasting iron at the back of her tongue. She tried to keep her mind on small things. The smell of pine sap. The scrape of rawhide. The rhythm of Stonehawk's steps. "Breathe with me," she told herself, matching his pace even when he said nothing. Halfway down the wash, Stonehawk froze. Ren felt it through the litter frame, the sudden stillness. A sound, faint, like a pebble shifted under a boot. Not theirs. Stonehawk's hand slid toward his knife. Not flashy, just ready. Ren's eyes went wide. Ilara's pulse hammered. From behind a rock, a boy's face appeared, dirty and sharp-eyed. Not a boy, really. Young man, maybe 16, skin browned by sun, hair chopped short. He raised both hands, palms out. "I am not with them," he whispered. "Please, do not shout." Stonehawk's eyes stayed cold. "Who are you?" The youth swallowed. "Rook Larkin. I work the line camps. I saw those men come in. They asked about a woman with a paper." He glanced at Ilara. You, Alara, felt the world tilt. That confirmed it. The riders had not stumbled into the valley. They had come for her. She tightened her grip on the blanket. How did they know? She asked. Rook looked away. A letter got seen. A man in town talks when he drinks. He shifted his weight. They are waiting for you at the cabin road. They think you will come the easy way. Stonehawk's gaze sharpened. How many 3 you can see? Rook said. 2 more down by the creek bend, hidden where the willows grow? Maybe more. The one with the gray hat? He is called Brimcrow. He pays in silver and trouble. Wren stiffened at the name. She had heard it once, in a boarding house whisper. A warning said with eyes cast down. A man who bought debts and broke people who could not pay. Ilara closed her eyes for a moment. Brimcrow. The name felt like a hand around her throat. Her father had mentioned a crow once, years ago, a man who wanted to lease the valley and got told no. Ilara had been a child then. She remembered her father's face, the rare anger. Why are you helping us? Stonehawk asked, voice still quiet. Rook's jaw worked. Because he's not a good man. Because I saw him put a rope on a rancher's neck over a grazing line. He drew a breath. Because my mother is buried on land he took. He looked at Ilara again. And because if you do not get to that cabin first, you will not get there at all. Stonehawk considered him a long moment. Then he jerked his chin. Walk ahead. No sudden moves. If you lie, you will regret it. Rook nodded fast and moved down the wash like a shadow. The subplot of a stranger joining them should have felt like relief. It did not. It felt like a door opening into a darker hallway. Ilara realized how wide this conflict was. It was not just her claim. It was old grudges, old hunger. Men who collected land the way others collected scars. They reached the point where the wash spilled into open ground. The cottonwoods were close now, their leaves whispering. The cabin sat beyond, half hidden. Stonehawk motioned for Wren to stay low. He and Rook crept forward first, scanning, listening. Wren held the litter steady, muscles shaking. Ilara stared at the cabin, her father's cabin, and felt tears threaten, not from sadness, but from the sharpness of almost. A twig snapped. Not close, but not far. Stonehawk signaled stop. Rook froze. The men at the cottonwoods shifted. One stood, head turning, as if he smelled something. Ilara's breath caught. The open ground felt like a spotlight. Stonehawk backed to Wren and whispered, "We need a diversion." Wren's mouth went dry. Like what? Stonehawk's eyes flicked to a slope on the far side, where loose rock lay piled. A rock slide could sound like a deer, or like a person. He looked at Rook. "Can you climb?" Rook nodded, already understanding. He slipped away, crawling up the slope, hands and knees, careful not to send stones tumbling too soon. Ilara watched him go and felt a strange sting of guilt. He was risking himself for strangers. She had spent so long trusting no one that she had forgotten what it looked like when someone chose to do right. Minutes stretched. The men below laughed at something. The sound carried wrong, too casual. Then a sudden rattle rang out on the far slope. Stones clattered down, louder and louder, bouncing like gunfire on rock. One of the men at the cottonwoods jumped up, rifle lifted. Another cursed. They turned toward the sound, stepping away from the cabin line. Stonehawk moved instantly. Now, he breathed. He and Wren hauled the litter forward, low and fast, the open ground swallowing them. Ilara bit down hard, pain flaring like heat through her leg and ribs, but she did not make a sound. She matched her breath to Stonehawk's grunt, to Wren's strained exhale. "Breathe with me. Breathe with me." They reached the cottonwoods, and the world changed. Shade wrapped around them. Bark and leaves broke sight lines. Stonehawk set Ilara down behind a thick trunk. He pressed a finger to his lips and listened. The men were still distracted, voices raised. But the distraction would not last. From deeper in the trees, a soft voice spoke, so close that Wren nearly cried out. "You should not be here." Stonehawk spun, knife half out. then froze. A woman stepped from behind the cabin corner, older than Alara, hair braided tight, eyes sharp as flint. She held a lantern even though it was day, as if she lived prepared for darkness. A rifle rested against her shoulder, not in threat, but in habit. Her name came out of Alara's memory like a ghost. Mavron Holt, her father's old neighbor. The woman he trusted with water rights and winter feed. Mavron's gaze flicked over Ellery's injury, then to Stonehawk. "I told your father they would come again," she said, voice low. He did not listen. She looked at Alara, and now they are here. They are not leaving empty-handed. Behind them, the men's voices shifted. Closer now, suspicion sharpening. A boot thudded on the cabin step. Someone was coming back. Mavron leaned in, lantern swinging slightly, and spoke like a warning carved into wood. "If Brimcrow sees you, he will not bargain. He will take what he wants and call it law." Stonehawk's eyes stayed on the trees, tracking sound. "Where is the back way?" he asked. Mavron's mouth tightened. "There is a back way, but it is not easy, and it is not safe." Alara heard the crunch of leaves just beyond the cottonwoods, closer than before. She felt the cabin at her back, the valley at her feet, the whole west holding its breath. Then Brimcrow's voice drifted through the trees, calm and pleased, as if he had already won. "I know you are here," he called. "Come out, and we can talk like civilized folk." Stonehawk crouched beside Alara, steady, voice a whisper meant only for her. "Hold still," he said. "Breathe with me." Alara drew an air that tasted of bark and cold fear. And in that moment, she understood the real fight was beginning right now. With the cabin walls closed, and the wrong men outside, and only one narrow chance to slip through before the valley turned into a trap, Stonehawk did not answer Brimcrow's call. He did not move either. He waited until the sound of boots shifted again, until the men outside grew certain of their advantage. Certainty made people careless. He leaned close to Alara, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "Breathe with me," he said once more, steady and calm, like a line thrown across dark water. Alara followed it. Pain still lived in her body, but fear no longer ruled it. Mavron Holt turned the lantern just enough to show a narrow space behind the cabin, a place where the wall met the slope and shadows gathered thick. "There is a crawl space under the back," she whispered. "Old storage. It leads to the creek cut. From there, you can move unseen for a spell." She looked at Stonehawk. "But not fast." Stonehawk nodded. Fast was not the plan. Quiet was. Wren swallowed her fear and took Alara's hand. "You are not alone," she said, and meant it with her whole chest. Alara squeezed back, strength passing between them in silence. Outside, Brimcrow laughed softly. He stepped closer, boots scuffing the dirt. His voice carried smooth and oily. "You have the paper, girl. You can save yourself trouble. Hand it over and walk away. Plenty of land left in this world for a woman who knows her place." Alara closed her eyes. She thought of her father's cabin in winter, smoke curling from the chimney, the sound of his boots at the door. She thought of the long road west, of every mile that had tested her. When she opened her eyes again, the fear had burned down to something clean. Stonehawk and Wren eased her toward the back of the cabin. Mavron lifted a loose plank and revealed the dark space beneath. Cool earth breathed up, damp and safe. Stonehawk slid in first, checking the way, then guided Alara down with hands that never hurried and never shook. The ground scraped her ribs and she hissed, but she held the sound. Wren followed, then Mavron, lantern shuttered tight. As they moved, a shout rang out front. One of Crow's men had spotted tracks too fresh to ignore. Voices rose. Boots pounded the cabin steps. A rifle but struck wood. Crow's voice sharpened. "Break the door." Stonehawk felt the vibration through the ground. He urged them forward. The crawl space opened near the creek cut, just as Mavron had said. Water murmured, covering small sounds. They slipped out one by one into willow shadow. Crow's men burst into the cabin moments later. The crash of splintered wood echoed through the valley. Alara felt a bitter twist of grief at the sound. But Stonehawk did not slow. Cabins could be rebuilt. Lives were harder. They moved along the creek, keeping low, using the bank and brush for cover. The water dulled their trail. Rook reappeared from the willows like a spirit, eyes bright with adrenaline. "I led one off," he whispered. "He will not be back soon." "Good," Stonehawk said. He glanced at the ridge. The light was turning, the sun sliding low. The day was finally leaning their way. Crow realized the trick too late. His shout carried across the valley, anger cracking through the smooth. "Spread out. Find them." But the valley was wide, and dusk was coming fast. They reached a bend where the creek cut deep and narrow. Stonehawk stopped and crouched. He checked Ellara's binding one last time. She watched his face and saw the question there. "Can you bear one more hard move?" She nodded. "I can." With care and effort, Stonehawk and Wren helped her sit, then stand. The pain flared white and fierce, but Ellara held tight to Stonehawk's arm and breathed through it. She took one step, then another. The ground did not give way. She was standing on her father's land. From the far side of the creek, Mavrin raised her rifle. She fired once, not at a man, but at a rock above Crow's position. The crack echoed and stones rained down. Shouts followed. Confusion spread. Crow cursed, sharp and loud. Stonehawk used the moment. He led Ellara into the thicker cottonwoods and toward the cabin from the back, taking a path only someone who had walked this land before would know. The men's voices fell behind them, scattered and angry. When they reached the cabin again, the damage was plain. The door hung crooked. A window was smashed, but the walls still stood. Ellara leaned against the rough wood and let out a breath she had been holding for days. Stonehawk did not rest. He circled wide, checking the perimeter, reading the land. When he returned, his nod was small but sure. "They are pulling back. Crow will not risk the dark here. He does not like ground he does not own." Mavrin lowered her rifle. "He will be back," she said. Ellara straightened as much as she could. "Then he will find me ready." Night settled gentle this time, like a blanket laid with care. They lit a small fire inside the cabin, smoke slipping through gaps in the roof. Wren cleaned Elara's cuts. Mavrin set a pot to boil. Rook sat near the door, keeping watch, his young face hard with new purpose. Stonehawk knelt and met Ellara's eyes. "The valley is yours if you claim it," he said. "The paper matters. So does staying." Ellara reached into her coat and drew out the folded deed, worn thin from the journey. She held it like a promise kept. "I will stay," she said. "Not alone?" Stonehawk hesitated, then gave a short nod. "I can help you set things right, until you no longer need me." Wren smiled through tears she did not bother to hide. "Looks like we found our place." Over the next days, the valley began to breathe again. Neighbors came quietly, one by one, drawn by Mavrin's word and the sight of Ellara standing despite her injury. Repairs began. Fence posts were set. A message was sent to town, clear and lawful. The deed was recorded. Witnesses signed. Crow sent no men back while the eyes of the valley were open. Rook chose to stay. He took work mending lines and learned the land with a hunger that matched Elara's. Mavrin shared stories by the fire. Truths about the past and warnings for the future. Wren found her footing, strong and sure, laughter returning to her voice. Stonehawk stayed longer than he planned. He taught Ellara how to set traps without waste, how to read weather in the bones, how to move without leaving a mark. She taught him the names of things he had never bothered to name, the small joys of a place becoming home. They spoke little of what had almost been lost. They spoke more of what could be built. One morning, as the valley lay quiet under a pale sun, Ellara walked without help to the creek. Her step was careful, but steady. Stonehawk watched from a distance, pride softening his eyes. She turned and met his gaze. "You did not stop," she said. He smiled then, a rare thing, quick and real. "Neither did you." The wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying the sound of water and work and life beginning again. The west was still hard. Men, like Brim Crow, still breathed. But the valley held, and so did the people who chose it. Ilara folded the deed and tucked it away, no longer something she had to clutch. It belonged to the land now, and the land knew her. She took a deep breath, free and full, and for the first time since she started west, she did not feel chased. Stonehawk walked to her side and stood there, not claiming, not leaving, just present, and that was enough. With care and effort, Stonehawk and Wren helped her sit, then stand. The pain flared white and fierce, but Ilara held tight to Stonehawk's arm and breathed through it. She took one step, then another. The ground did not give way. She was standing on her father's land. From the far side of the creek, Mavron raised her rifle. She fired once, not at a man, but at a rock above Crow's position. The crack echoed and stones rained down. Shouts followed. Confusion spread. Crow cursed, sharp and loud. Stonehawk used the moment. He led Ilara into the thicker cottonwoods and toward the cabin from the back, taking a path only someone who had walked this land before would know. The men's voices fell behind them, scattered and angry. When they reached the cabin again, the damage was plain. The door hung crooked. A window was smashed, but the walls still stood. Ilara leaned against the rough wood and let out a breath she had been holding for days. Stonehawk did not rest. He circled wide, checking the perimeter, reading the land. When he returned, his nod was small, but sure. They are pulling back. Crow will not risk the dark here. He does not like ground he does not own. Mavron lowered her rifle. He will be back, she said. Ilara straightened as much as she could. Then he will find me ready. Night settled, gentle this time, like a blanket laid with care. They lit a small fire inside the cabin, smoke slipping through gaps in the roof. Wren cleaned Ilara's cuts. Mavron set a pot to boil. Rook sat near the door, keeping watch, his young face hard with new purpose. Stonehawk knelt and met Ilara's eyes. "The valley is yours if you claim it," he said. "The paper matters. So does staying." Ilara reached into her coat and drew out the folded deed, worn thin from the journey. She held it like a promise kept. "I will stay," she said. "Not alone." Stonehawk hesitated, then gave a short nod. "I can help you set things right, until you no longer need me." Wren smiled through tears. She did not bother to hide. "Looks like we found our place." Over the next days, the valley began to breathe again. Neighbors came quietly, one by one, drawn by Mavron's word and the sight of Ilara standing despite her injury. Repairs began. Fence posts were set. A message was sent to town, clear and lawful. The deed was recorded. Witnesses signed. Crow sent no men back while the eyes of the valley were open. Rook chose to stay. He took work mending lines and learned the land with a hunger that matched Ilara's. Mavron shared stories by the fire, truths about the past and warnings for the future. Wren found her footing, strong and sure, laughter returning to her voice. Stonehawk stayed longer than he planned. He taught Ilara how to set traps without waste, how to read weather in the bones, how to move without leaving a mark. She taught him the names of things he had never bothered to name, the small joys of a place becoming home. They spoke little of what had almost been lost. They spoke more of what could be built. One morning, as the valley lay quiet under a pale sun, Ilara walked without help to the creek. Her step was careful but steady. Stonehawk watched from a distance, pride softening his eyes. She turned and met his gaze. "You did not stop," she said. He smiled then, a rare thing, quick and real. "Neither did you." The wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying the sound of water and work and life beginning again. The west was still hard. Men like Brim Crow still breathed. But the valley held, and so did the people who chose it. Ilara folded the deed and tucked it away, no longer something she had to clutch. It belonged to the land now, and the land knew her. She took a deep breath, free and full, and for the first time since she started west, she did not feel chased. Stonehawk walked to her side and stood there, not claiming, not leaving, just present. and that was enough.